Today, we are going to talk about the Shema prayer that is found in Deuteronomy. The Shema is one of the most famous prayers in the Bible. It was a daily prayer that the ancient Israelites prayed daily and still do by Jewish people to this day. And we first see it in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 6, 4 and 5 says, "Hear, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength." Now, the Shema gets its name from the first Hebrew word of the prayer, which is hear or listen. This prayer is a pledge of allegiance to God. Moses is addressing the new generation of Israel as they prepare to enter the Promised Land. He is urging them not to repeat the mistakes their parents' generations made, wanting them to experience the full blessing of the Promised Land. But to do so, the people must learn to listen and to love God fully above all else. So we're going to kind of deep dive into the meaning of the Shema prayer. The opening line, "Hear, O Israel." When you see the word "hear" in this prayer, it's not just let the sound wave enter your ears. And I found it interesting that Sister Mills gave her Bible lesson last week on listening. So God has a theme for us here this week, or this month, I guess. But the word Shema in the Hebrew means allow the words to sink in, to provide understanding and generate a response. The word Shema is about action. In Hebrew, hearing and doing are the same thing. So we're going to break down each prominent word in the prayer. So we'll start with listen. Shema is actually a very common word in the Bible because hearing is a universal activity that everyone understands. But it's usually connected with the ear. So in Proverbs 20 and 12, it says ears that hear, or ears that Shema, if you look at it in the original, and eyes that see, the Lord has made them both. Now, that seems basic enough to say, but if you look at the other ways that the Hebrew authors can use the word Shema, they use it to mean more than just the sound that we hear in our ears. In Hebrew, Shema can also mean pay attention to or focus on. For example, when Leah, who wasn't loved by her husband Jacob, when she has a son, she names him Simon, or in Hebrew, it's Shimon, because she says, "The Lord has Shema that I am unloved." So Shema means to hear and pay attention to, and even more, it can also mean to respond to what you hear. And this is why so many of the cries for help in the book of Psalm begin with a call for God to listen. Psalms 27 and 7 says, "Shema my voice when I call, O Lord," or "Hear my voice when I call, O Lord. Be merciful, answer me." Asking God to Shema is the same as asking God to act or to do something on our behalf. When God helps you, that's when you know that he has Shema'd. It's the same when God asks his people to listen. For God's point of view, listening is basically the same as keeping the covenant. That was God's main heartbeat for his people. Keep the covenant that we have between each other. So when God asks the people to Shema, what he means is that they listen and obey. Listen, like when the people of Israel come to Mount Sinai, God says in the original, it says, "If you Shema me, if you listen or hear me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession." And there's a couple of interesting things about this verse of Exodus 19 and 5. In the Hebrew, the word Shema is repeated twice when you look at this verse in the Hebrew original context. In the sentence, it gives it an emphasis. It says, "If you Shema, Shema." So here I show you, when you see the H8085 twice in a row, that's the original Hebrew that they're giving you. And that's the word Shema. If you Shema, Shema. And what he's saying is listen closely. If you really listen. So what's interesting is that in ancient Hebrew, there is no separate word for the word obey. which is to carry out the wishes of someone who is in authority over you or knows better than you. In the Bible, if you want to say, I will listen and do what you say, or I will obey you, you would use a single word, which is Shema. Because in Hebrew, listening and doing are two sides of the same coin. Exodus 19, we're going to look at 5 examples of this. In Exodus 19, in these 5 major translations, it says, if you obey me fully, if you will indeed obey my voice, if you will listen indeed, obey my voice, if you obey my voice, if you obey my voice. Those are the top 5 of the major translations that we have into English, and they don't even tell you that the Hebrew word here is listen, because they're already giving you the meaning for it. They've translated from the actual context that the Hebrew writer was giving, which means to respond. Hear, Israel, respond, obey my word. And this is why later in Israel's history, when the people were breaking their covenant promises to God, the Hebrew prophet would say things like, they have ears, but they're not listening. The Israelites, of course, could hear just fine. They could hear the sound, but they were not listening to God's commands. If they were actually listening the way that God asks us to listen, they would have acted differently. And so, in the end, listening in the Bible is about giving respect to the one who is speaking to you and doing what they say. Real listening takes effort and action. And in the book of James, at the end of chapter 1, it says, don't merely listen. Now, he is writing in Greek, but he's Jewish. He grew up reading the Hebrew Bible. So even when he's writing in Greek, the apostles are often thinking in Hebrew. So James 1:21-25, Sister Miranda touched on these same verses last week. It says, so get rid of every filthy habit and all wicked conduct. Submit to God and accept the word that he plants in your heart, which is able to save you. Do not deceive yourself by just listening to his word. Instead, put it into practice. If you listen to the word but do not put it into practice, you are like people who look in a mirror and see themselves as they are. They take a good look at themselves and then go away and at once forget what they look like. But if you look closely into the perfect law that sets people free and keep on paying attention to it, and do not simply listen and then forget it, but put it into practice, you will be blessed by God in what you do. The next instruction after here is love. Israel is called to love their God. And what we translate into English as love here is the Hebrew word ahava. It looks like ahaba, but the Hebrew lettering is it's pronounced differently. So it's ahava is the word. Ahava is not a warm, fuzzy feeling or emotional energy that we get when we like someone, when you first see your special someone. Just like listening, biblical love is also about action. You ahava someone, or you love someone when you act in loyalty and faithfulness. What does that mean? Love is a very common word in most languages. And as it is in ancient Hebrew, it mostly refers to the affection or the care that one has for another person, or one that they show another person. It sometimes is described as physical affection, like the king of Persia's love for Queen Esther. But there are other Hebrew words that are more specifically referred to for that kind of physical or sexual desire, and the word in Hebrew is dodim or agab. But ahava, which is translated from love the Lord your God, is a more broad word. For example, Abraham had ahava for his son Isaac, that's parental love. Jonathan showed ahava or love for his friend David, and that would be brotherly love. In fact, a whole group of people can have love or ahava for their leader, like when the Israelites showed love for their king David, which is loyal love. So there are different kinds of affection described in that one word. Now, all of this is very helpful for understanding God's love, or God's ahava in that word, in the Old Testament, because in Deuteronomy, Moses told the Israelites, God showed affection for you. He chose you because of his love for you. And when you look at that, it's the word ahava, because of his love for you. God doesn't love them because they earned it or they deserve it. It just originates from God's character. It's who he is. He loves because he loves. However, Jeremiah says that God's love is an everlasting love. It has no end because it has no beginning. It is eternal. It's just is an eternal fact of God's character in the universe. And God's love is not a duty. It's a genuine feeling, an affection that God experiences towards his people. And this is why the prophet Hosea compares God's love for his people to a husband's ahava for his wife, or a parent's showing ahava towards their child. This is one of the strongest feelings that God has towards you. This feeling drives you into action. Because you love your spouse, because you love your child, there are things that you do for them out of love and protection and care. But that doesn't mean that God's love is just a feeling. God's love is action, and he chooses to do it. Like when Moses says, because of his love for your ancestors, he brought you out of Egypt with great power. He brought you out because of his love. God's love isn't just a sentiment, it's something that God does. And so, in the Shema, Israel is called to respond to God's love by showing this ahava, or this love in return. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. And just like God's love, human love should show itself through its actions. It's no different in a marriage or with your children and your family. We say that love or actions speak louder than words. You can say you love someone, but if you're not showing that you love them, it's a little bit hard to believe. So when Israel and we are called to love God, it should show in how we live our lives for him. In Deuteronomy 10 and 12 to 13, it says, what does the Lord your God ask of you except to fear the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to love him and serve him, and to keep his commands? All of these are actions, and they're centered around love. If I'm not doing them, I don't actually love God. I just say that I do. Which leads to one last thing in the Old Testament. I also show my love for God in how I treat the people around me, your family, your neighbor, your friends. In Deuteronomy 10, 18, and 19, we read that God defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and he shows love for the immigrants among you, giving them food and clothing, and so you also are to show love for the immigrant. So for Israel at the time, that was anyone that was not in the covenant. And thank God that they started showing love to we who were once immigrants to the family of God. So the people are to imitate God's love by showing love for others. And this is the idea underneath the famous line of, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. At the end of the day, all of this love is rooted in God's own eternal love. Like we read in the New Testament letter of 1 John 4 and 19, it says, we love because God first loved us. For Israel, loving means faithful obedience to the terms of their covenant relationship with their God Yahweh. Obedience to these laws is not about legalism or trying to earn God's favor. It's about love and active listening. If Israel loves God, they are more easily to respond and listen to his teachings and guidance because of their love for him, their commitment, their loyalty, their faithfulness. This is why the words listen and love are so tightly connected and repeated throughout these opening speeches of Deuteronomy. This prayer is about listening to and loving God. It's an allegiance. But the prayer continues. It says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. So we're going to break down each of those words. In other words, the people are to love God with all of their being, their knowledge, their existence. Everything that they are is to love God with action, obedience, and covenant faithfulness. It's a beautiful prayer. But why did it become so important for ancient Israel and Jewish people? The words of this prayer take on an even deeper meaning when we look at the context of ancient Israel and how they were countercultural to those who were serving other gods around them. They were to serve one God above all else. That was their command. Again, the pledge, the Shema is a pledge of allegiance to this one God of Israel. And that excludes allegiance or alliance to any other God. All of this makes perfect sense when you read further into Deuteronomy, and the Israelites have been steeped in a polytheistic culture for generations, all the way from their roots in Canaan to the long years in Egypt. Further traveling through Canaanite territory in the wilderness, they have been surrounded by people who have been worshiping many gods for generations. Moses believed that loyalty, obedience, and love for their one true God is the only way to life. And that is one of the greatest threats to Israel's future, was dividing their allegiance between many gods. So the Shema was prayed daily. It was a daily reminder to the people that Yahweh alone was their God, and him alone you shall serve. The prayer goes on from here to show the value of passing this conviction on to later generations, to spare them from the tragic result of idolatry to other gods. Deuteronomy 6 and 7 says, "And you shall repeat them diligently to your sons, and speak of them when you sit down in your house, when you walk on the road, when you lie down, when you get up." That's basically every single day from morning till night, you include God in your teaching. He is what you surround your life around. We also see the Shema in the New Testament. The Shema was widely practiced in the Second Temple period, and this prayer would have been formative for Jesus growing, and we see him drawing from it in his own teachings. When he was asked in the New Testament which command in the Torah was the greatest, Jesus answers them, and he says, "The first of all the commandments is, 'Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength.' This is the first commandment. The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." And we see this in Mark chapter 12. Deuteronomy 6, verse 8 says, "You shall also tie them as a sign to your head, and they shall be as frontlets on your forehead." Or tie them as signs on your hands, and they shall be as frontlets on your forehead. So when we hear that, we think, what does that mean? Now, we do see in the physical, the Jewish culture, they do physically wrap these things on their arms and put it on their forehead as a symbol and reminder to them of how to pray the Shema. But what it means symbolically is that we use our eyes to see and our hands to do everything. So this language represents how the words of the Shema were meant to guide the vision and action of every moment of life for the people. Everything that you do, everything that you see, make it around God. Let it be God-centered. Let him drive your life. This explains why John, in his vision, says that in the new creation, God's people, when they were living in intimate proximity to God, in Revelations 22 and 4, it says they will see God's face and his name will be on their foreheads. This way of life is in contrast to those who reject Jesus. They have given their alliance or allegiance to other powers bent on destroying them. And this is depicted as the beast in Revelation 13. John also drew upon the teachings of the Shema here to depict a human life on the path to destruction. In Revelation 13 and verse 16, it says, "And he," speaking of the beast, "causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, and the free and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hands and on their foreheads." So you notice throughout the Bible that the enemy will twist everything that God has made good. He will try to copy and imitate and make it look like the original. But in fact, he's actually twisted it and made it backwards. For John, the choice is stark. You either give your allegiance to Jesus and allow it to influence your life and how you see and how you act, or your allegiance will belong to a destructive power that will also govern how you see and how you act and what you do in life. One path leads to life, the other leads to death. These ideas and images from John's vision come from Moses' words in Deuteronomy, specifically from the Shema prayer. The next was love the Lord your God with all your heart. This is the fourth key word in this prayer, and in the Hebrew, it sometimes is pronounced as levav, but often in short form it's lev. Ancient understanding of the heart. Different cultures throughout history have had different conceptions of how the human body works. And this is also true for ancient Israel and how they wrote the Bible. They knew that the heart was an organ in the chest that gives and sustains life. There's mention of a heart attack in the Bible when it says Nabal, whose heart died inside of him and he became like stone. It's speaking of a heart attack there. So they understand that the heart is the organ that keeps you alive. But the biblical authors talk about the heart in many other ways that might seem a little strange to modern day readers. And that's because Israel, they didn't explain it like we would for our brain. They used the word heart. They imagine that all of the human's intellectual activity takes place in the heart. For example, you know with your heart in the Bible. Your heart is where you understand and you make connections. In the book of Proverbs, it says that wisdom dwells in the heart. Your heart is what you see, what you use, to discern between truth and error, like Solomon did when he was king. So the heart is where you think, where you make sense of the world, and where you do more. The heart is what drives your core. You feel pain in your heart, like Hannah did when she couldn't have children. In fact, the phrase a broken heart comes from ancient biblical Hebrew. You can also experience fear in your heart. Your heart can melt with distress. Your heart experiences depression. But then on the flip side, your heart is where you experience joy. In Hebrew, to be happy is said to be good of heart or have a heart of joy. So the heart is the generator of physical life. It also is the center of your intellectual and your emotional life. And there's more. In Hebrew, the heart is where you make choices motivated by desire. So David had it in his heart, the Bible says, to build a temple for God. Your heart is where your affections are centered. They're called the desires of your heart. If you really want something and you go after it, like Nathan said to David, he said, whatever is in your heart, go and do it. So when the Bible talks about the heart, it's talking about the center of all parts of human existence. As in the well-known proverb, I'm pretty sure Dave included this in his message a couple weeks ago, that you have to guard your heart, proverb says, because out of it comes your whole life, all the issues of life. So those who become a child of God, who live for the King of Kings, have to have a transformation of the heart. The prophet Jeremiah believed that the human heart was fundamentally broken. He said, the heart of a human is deceitful above all, irreversibly sick. Who can understand it? And he had watched a whole generation turn away from God. They started sacrificing their children like the pagans were doing to their foreign gods, as if it were a good thing. So this is why Jeremiah felt that the only hope for humanity is the total renewal of the human heart. Moses predicted that if Israel was ever going to love their God, their heart would need to be circumcised, which is a metaphor for removing evil and stubbornness from the human heart, which tends to be there at birth. It's something that we have to allow God to chisel away. David, after he committed murder and adultery, he pleads with God to create in him a pure heart and renew in him a right spirit. The prophet Ezekiel hoped for a day when God would remove the heart of stone and give his people a heart of soft flesh, meaning moldable, not unmoving, but one that can be touched and transformed. Which is very similar to Jeremiah's hope that God would write the commandments of the Torah on the hearts of his people. And that brings us back again around to the Shema. Every day, God's people are called to devote to God their whole body and mind, their feelings, their desires, and their future and failures. And this is what it means to love the Lord your God with all of your heart. Now, the next word is soul. And I found it very interesting digging into soul because I realized that my understanding of it compared to the Hebrew writer's original intent was a little bit off. So the Hebrew word for soul is nephesh, and it happens 700 times in the Old Testament. The common English translation of this word is often soul, but it doesn't quite do it justice to what the Hebrew writer was trying to translate and transmit to the readers. And here's why. The English word soul comes with a lot of baggage from ancient Greek philosophy. My husband touched on this a few weeks back when I think it was on a Wednesday night. It's the idea that the soul, and this is kind of where I was a little bit shocked because I realized that's kind of how I thought too. But the ancient Greek philosophy is the idea that a soul is a non-physical, immortal essence of a person that is contained or trapped in these bodies to be released at death. I kind of thought that. So they're saying it's kind of like the ghost of the machine. This notion is totally foreign to the biblical writers and what nephesh, the word that they actually used, truly means. Now, they do have the concept of our spirit going to heaven, but they don't talk about it the same way that we do. The most basic meaning of nephesh is throat. And I'll explain, because I had that same kind of like throat. When Israel was wandering in the wilderness, and they're hungry, and they're thirsty, and they're cranky, and they say to God, we miss the cucumbers and melons that we had in Egypt, and now our soul is dried up. That's found in Numbers 11. I think it was verses 4 through 8, something like that. But it's Numbers chapter 11. In the KJV, it says, now our soul is dried up. But nephesh doesn't only mean throat as in this dangly thing that holds the ball on top of your head. What it's talking about is how your whole life and body depend on what goes in and what comes out of the throat. So nephesh could also be used to refer to the whole person. Like in Genesis, where there were 39 nephesh in Jacob's family. That's 39 people. In the Torah, a murderer is called a nephesh slayer. A kidnapper is called a nephesh thief. In Genesis 2 and 7, it says that man became a living nephesh when God breathed life into him. So in the Bible, people don't have a nephesh per se, like how we originally understood it. They are a nephesh. We are a soul. We are a living soul made by God. Even though nephesh is often translated as soul, the Hebrew word really refers to the whole human as a living physical organism. In fact, this is why the biblical people can often use the word to refer to themselves as it gets translated from me or I when they're using the word nephesh. For example, Psalms 119, most translations will read, let me live that I may praise you. In the Hebrew, the poet literally says, let my nephesh live that it may praise you. So here it's showing us that it is me, I. Let me live that I may praise you. Let my soul live that it may praise you. By using nephesh, the poet is emphasizing that their entire being, their life, their body, offers thanks to God. In the Song of Songs, the young woman constantly refers to her lover as the one that my nephesh loves. And of course, love isn't just an intellectual experience, It's an emotion that activates your whole body, your entire nefesh. And this helps us understand the brilliance of other biblical poets who could combine multiple meanings in this one word, in one place. Like in Psalms 42, they use the word nefesh as the deer pants for the water, so my soul, or so my nefesh pants for you. My soul thirsts for the living God. On a physical level, your throat can become thirsty, just like the deer's. But then that physical thirst can become a metaphor for how your whole physical being longs to know and to be known by your Creator. You hunger and you thirst for your God. Which brings us, again, back around to the Shema. To love God with your whole soul means to devote your entire physical existence to Him. It's about offering your entire being with all of its capabilities, all of its limitations, in the effort to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. Love God with all your soul. The last word is strength. The Hebrew word for strength is moed. The Hebrew word here, it happens 300 times in the scriptures, and it doesn't actually mean strength as in muscle power. There's a Hebrew word that actually does mean muscle power, and it's koach, K-O-A-K-H, and it's not the word moed that this verse is translated from. The Shema is one of the only places in the whole Bible that uses moed that's translated as the word strength in English. So again, what's up with that? But the most common meaning of moed is very or much. I just found this study so interesting. I hope that I'm not like boring you to death, but I totally geek out when it comes to this stuff, and I've just taken you on the rabbit hole with me. But it means very or much. Love God with very or much. It's an adverb, a word that comes alongside other words to augment their meaning, to increase their meaning to total capacity. So in Genesis chapter 1, God looked at what He made 6 times, and He calls it good. It is good. But then, on the 7th day, on the climax of God's creation, He says it is moed good. He said it is very good. In the story of Noah, the flood waters keep rising, and in the original, when you look at it, it says it becomes moed powerful, or extremely powerful over the land. In the story of Cain and Abel, Cain wasn't just angry at his brother, he was moed angry. And when Saul becomes the king of Israel, he was moed happy. It is a really common Hebrew word that intensifies the meaning of the word, which is very this or really that. I really like chicken wings. I really do. And poutine. I know you can tell. Moed in the Hebrew is used to increase a word's force to total capacity. And when they want to do this, they'll say it twice. Anytime, if you pay attention to the biblical writing, when a word is repeated twice or 3 times, it's like a big red flag saying, pay attention, this is important. So Jacob becomes moed wealthy, with flocks and camels and donkeys and servants. Or the Israelite spies went to investigate the promised land, and they said, the land we passed through is moed good. It was flowing with milk and honey. So it's pretty clear moed, or strength, doesn't mean strength as in muscle power, but very or much. And when we bring that back to the Shema, the people are called to love God with all of their heart, that is, their will and affection, with all of their soul, which is their entire physical being, their whole life, and with all of their strength, which is all of their muchness. Whatever you have access to that is very or much, you have an opportunity to praise and love and honor and serve your God with. If moed can intensify the word's meaning to total capacity, then really this final thing that you use to love God isn't really a thing at all. It's everything. Loving God with your moed, or loving God with your strength, means devoting every possibility, opportunity, and capacity that you have to honoring him and loving your neighbor as yourself. It is the most wide and expansive word in the Shema, because moed can sometimes refer to just about anything that the writer was trying to convey. Different interpretations of moed, or strength, which raises one last really fascinating point, is because this word was capable of meaning many different types of nuances in ancient Jewish communities, it was interpreted in the Shema different ways. So clearly we don't all have the same capacities in life. We don't all have the same things. We are different. We are made up of different abilities and gifts. Some rich, some poor, some weak, some strong. Like, we are different. So moed can be interpreted different for each individual. The ancient Jewish scholars who translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek, when they came to moed, or strength, in the Shema, they translated it to the Greek word dunamis. They translated it as power or strength. And this is the interpretation that most English or modern translations have adopted. But if you look at the ancient Aramaic translation of the Bible, you discover that these scholars interpreted moed, or strength, as wealth. Money is a concrete thing that opens up all kinds of opportunities to love God by giving away resources, by helping others. And when Jesus was asked about the most important command in Scripture, he quoted the Shema. And he used two words to unpack the meaning of moed. He says to love the Lord your God with all your mind and with all your power, dunamis. But both are human capacities that can be used to love God in an infinite number of ways. So, if that's the case, which interpretation is right? Is moed strength, wealth, or is it your mind? But asking that is the wrong question. The word moed doesn't limit the number of ways that you can show love to God. It's just the opposite. The point is that everything in a person's life, every moment and every opportunity, every ability and capacity offers a chance for us to honor God and to love him in the way that he desires, the one that made you, showing your gratitude and your thanks in any way possible, whatever that means for you. It's a call to love God with all of your muchness. Do you have talent? Do you have wealth? Do you have intellect? How can you serve God with your muchness? Some of us are much smarter than I. Serve God that way. The Shema prayer for Christians. The Shema, again, is such a beautiful prayer. It really is. When you look into it and understand it at its true depth, there's a reason why God's people have been praying these words for millennia. They are simple words with the capacity to reshape the course of an entire people. Praying the Shema can keep God's love and loyalty at the forefront of our minds and drive us towards obedience, not out of obligation or duty, but out of love for our God. In the Gospel of John, the words of Jesus echo the Shema. John 14:21 says, "The one who has my commandments and keeps them is the one who loves me, and the one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and reveal myself to him." Following Jesus is about love. And as we receive Jesus' love, we respond with gratitude and humility, with a commitment to honor and love God in return. And this love generates more love, which results in faithfulness and obedience. And these are truths that can and will transform us from the inside out. And I can't help but wonder if there's any other way that we can imagine that is better to keep the truths of this prayer at the forefront of our minds than praying the Shema daily, just as ancient Israel did. Every day, church, remind ourselves, hear, Church of God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And that is the meaning of the Shema. Praise the Lord. You have 5 minutes before it's actually time to go get your children, and then we will reconvene at 11 for family worship.